You didn't build a great business by being timid. And now it's time to get back to business the same way you built it, with passion. UBS is here with the resources and knowledge you need today. We've weathered the storm with business owners for more than 150 years, and what we've learned can help you right now, not just for your own personal goals, for your business. With insights and strategies to help you get up and running with the focus and determination that made you a success in the first place. It's a matter of asking the right questions and speaking with the right people who can help you find the solutions to move your business forward. With UBS, the possibilities are endless, but the focus is always on you, your family, and your business. Why not benefit from all of the knowledge and resources available to you from UBS? Few people could have built what you built. Proceed with passion.
Thank you all for joining us for today's installment of the Leadership Lunch series presented by UBS. I'm delighted to host co-founder and CEO of Mass Bay Brewing Company, Dan Kenary, today for a conversation about building a business at the start of the craft beer revolution, human-centered leadership, and the future of the food and drink space in light of the pandemic. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce Jim Ducey from UBS to make some opening remarks.
Good morning, and thanks very much, Linda. On behalf of UBS Wealth Management, I'd like to thank you for joining us today, and it's my sincere hope that you and your loved ones are safe and healthy. And my name is Jim Ducey. I'm the Managing Director for UBS and responsible for running the New England market. I actively work with our financial advisors around New England to help deliver the firm for our clients and their families. You know, UBS has a long tradition similar to the Boston Globe that we've been in Boston for over 150 years. But people don't realize that our lineage dates back to the Payne Weber and Kidder Peabody, two firms that were both founded in Boston in the late 1800s. And throughout that entire history, our UBS financial advisors have worked with individual business owners and entrepreneurs to help them improve their lives and help them leave legacies that matter. And I'd like to thank Linda and the Globe for their continued work and dedication to our city and the Commonwealth. UBS has really enjoyed this partnership over this last 6-part series. We're excited about today's discussion with Mass Bay Brewing Company co-founder and CEO Dan Kenary, who will focus on the decisions that he had to make in light of COVID-19, his thoughts on stock ownership, employee stock ownership plans, also known as ESOPs, and his vision for the local economy's future. As we all know far too well, this pandemic is hitting our city and our city's economy really hard. And the number of open small businesses has plummeted by more than 44% since the start of the year. And total small business revenue in Boston has cratered by about 52%. So how do we remain resilient? Where are we looking for opportunity? And how can certain business strategies keep our industries afloat? So we welcome the CEO of Boston Globe, Linda Henry, alongside Dan, for a fireside discussion on these unprecedented times that we're seeing right here in Boston now. So thanks again, Linda and Dan, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jim, for being with us. And thank you so much to UBS for presenting this really fun event series. And now I'd like to welcome Dan, leader of Harpoon Brewery, which has been headquartered in South Boston's waterfront since 1986. Dan, it is such a pleasure to speak with you today. Welcome.
Linda, thank you very much. I know it wasn't called the Seaport back then, certainly, but it's been an exciting journey watching the neighborhood change down here.
That, and then it was called the Innovation District, and now you're the Seaport again. What was it called before when you started down there?
You know, no one called it anything because it was just this, parking lots and empty warehouses. No one had any reason really other than us and some fish processing companies to come down to this neck of the woods, unless you were going to Jimmy's Harborside or Anthony's Pier 4.
So I want to start, you grew up in Worcester, and I want to start with your adventure in creating this landmark New England company. And you've taken a lot of pride in your in your Worcester background and a lot of lessons from there. And you were at college and at Harvard, and you went on an adventure that really sort of changed your thinking.
Absolutely. Well, I got to say, Linda, because I'm a newspaper guy from way back. My first job for 10 years, from when I was 8 until the day I left for college at 18, I delivered the Worcester Telegram 6 mornings a week. So I feel like my roots are in your business as well. Yeah, I'm from very proudly from Worcester, and I managed to come closer to Boston to go to college. And I really I love beer and drank a decent amount of beer back in high school and college, certainly. And one thing that was consistent was the style selection was really limited. So I was fortunate enough to do a backpacking trip around Western Europe, for 2 months after I graduated from college, before I started my real job at a bank in Chicago. And I came upon all these incredible beer styles, whether it was in Ireland or England or Belgium, Germany. It was like, oh my God, I was like a kid in a candy store. Because having, driven coast to coast in the US, it was all light yellow lagers, no matter where you went, not only with the national brands, but even the regional brands back then, they were all light yellow lagers. There was really no choice. And going to Europe, you're like, oh my gosh, the choice here, the history, the styles, the flavors, it was pretty amazing. And so I went to work out in Chicago and kept in touch with a college classmate of mine named Rich Doyle. And he then attended business school here in Boston, and he started doing a research project in 1986 on the microbrewing movement, which was just getting going out in the Pacific Northwest at the time. And Rich and I had a lot of beer together over the years, and decided to take a hard look at opening up a microbrewery, as it was called then, here in Boston, and left my banking job. That was an interesting conversation with my teetotaling parents, that for all that education and a solid banking job, I was going to walk away from it and try to start a microbrewery, but did that in 1986.
So you were 25 in 1986.
Yep.
You didn't have children, you didn't have a job, you had a job, but you didn't have anything sort of tying you down, and you just knew that this was the right time to take this.
It was the right time for me to take a risk. You're absolutely right. No kids, no mortgage. It was like, if I was going to take a risk on an entrepreneurial adventure, that was the time to do it, I thought. I didn't have, there was not the infrastructure necessarily to support entrepreneurs like there is today, but it just felt like the right thing to do. And as we looked at the marketplace back then, and those old enough to remember the pre-Starbucks days or pre-Coffee Connection days in Boston, and the pre-Ben & Jerry's, you're starting to see in coffee and ice cream, the premiumization, people are willing to pay more for flavor, stories behind brands. And we thought, gosh, what we'd seen in Europe, why couldn't we bring that to the US? And we went out and we got brewing license 001 here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to open up the first, brewery in Boston in over 25 years.
What's amazing is that there's this sort of, well, first of all, it was a very bold thing for you to do, even though at the time it seemed low stakes, and now in retrospect it was a really smart thing to do. But you were building an industry. There's this, I'm sure that, there's so many craft brewers now that I'm sure people say to you all the time, oh, it must have been so great 35 years ago when there was nobody else on the shelf. But what was the reality?
Jim Cook and I actually have some great conversations about this, because it was pretty lonely back in the 80s. And the challenges were different. Like when we started, there were around 100 breweries in the country. Now there are 8,500. So yes, we have grown up with the industry. We've helped lead the development of the industry. And that has been a real privilege and a really fun part of my career, personally and professionally. But back then, the real challenge was education, because people had no idea what we were trying to do. As I said, for so many years that beer was light yellow lager, we'd bring our beer into accounts and they'd say, what is this? Is this yuppie stuff you're making? Or beer's not supposed to be this amber, this dark colored. What is this? Is there stuff floating in this? And it was a real education. It was real hand selling and going into accounts and meeting people and saying, no, try this beer. Beer is a perishable product. It has a shelf life closer to milk than it does to wine. People didn't know that. So like, what does it matter if the beer is coming from Amsterdam or St. Louis, whatever? It doesn't matter. Well, no, it actually does. Here's a fresh beer and taste it. So it took a long time. It was fun. We got to know almost everybody in the business in the country in those days. It was a small kind of band of us trying to overturn, multi-billion-dollar industry dominated by, a handful of international companies. But, we I don't think, certainly at the time, we didn't think we had it easy. And I say to people that have gotten into the business more recently, like it was just different challenges. But the education was the prime focus that we had to work on in those years.
There was education, but there was also no infrastructure, right? It was the big guys selling the pale yellow stuff. And so getting your materials, raising the money, and getting a distribution, getting the taps in the bar.
Oh yeah, it was. There was only one company in the country that made brewing equipment for breweries of our size out in Portland, Oregon. That was it. Otherwise, we had to go to Germany for stuff because Germany at the time had about 2,000 breweries, a lot of them around, the size we are now, or, Wachusett is now or something. So they made equipment for our size breweries. Nobody did in the States. Getting malt and hops, it was a real challenge. They had no idea kind of who we were, what we were trying to do. And I think a lot of them simply felt that we were going to be a flash in the pan, right? If you looked at the charts, and this is one thing my parents looked at when I was trying to convince them this was a good move, the number of breweries in the US had been on a decline for 100 years. And all the power was going to these bigger and bigger companies. So what made us think that we could actually reverse that trend? So a lot of these suppliers were even like, okay, you guys have got to pay up front if we're going to be shipping you what you need. So it was a challenge getting in. And bars back then had 3 or 4 draft lines, maybe 5 or 6, the good ones, not like the 24 to 30 today. So going in and trying to dislodge one of 4 was a hard challenge compared to going in today and trying to get one of 25, let's say. So yeah, lots of new challenges.
And when you started in what is today the Seaport, the waterfront area, you had to actually build out. It was a very heavy upfront investment, right? You had to actually build out.
Yeah, it was. We have great space down there. This was a building built shortly after Pearl Harbor by the Navy to build destroyers. So there's 45-foot ceilings. It was built to withstand a direct hit by the Germans or Japanese. So there's a lot of steel reinforced concrete, put heavy tanks on. And so it's great space. Yeah, we had to order a bunch of tanks and install them. And it's a capital intensive industry, unless you go the contract brewing route, which is what, for example, Boston Beer did. They had, they brewed their beer down in Pittsburgh, and a bunch of other breweries went that route because they could either raise less money, or what money they raised, they could spend on sales and marketing. But we felt it was really important. We were always about, again, hearkening back to those days in Europe, where breweries are right in the center of the city and they have tap rooms or beer cellars. We wanted people to be able to come and visit us, get to know us, have our beers right from the taps, if you will.
And as you were building it out, I've heard you tell really great stories, and it's always fun to look back after you've made it through the hard times to talk about how great those hard times were for you retrospectively. But you've talked about how starting a business in a challenging environment makes your business a lot stronger. There's so much luck in anything and everything, like so much luck, and particularly in business, there's so much luck with timing. And you were challenged and really challenged to your core so many times that it's given you this staying power. Talk about the advice that you give around that.
That's a great point, Linda. From out of adversity comes strength. I'm such a believer in that. And I say to people in our industry, because the last 10 years have been a great time to start a brewery. And people, you learn kind of lessons from that it's an easy business. And it's not, it's like your business. You were saying it earlier before we got on the air about how we all have got to be focused, innovating all the time, or we're going to go away. And in our early years, we faced plenty of times when the easier decision would have been to just say, shut out the lights and say, this is it. We learned all the tricks in the book. You send a check and you don't sign it to get an extra few days on your payables and all that stuff. We did it. And one funny story we tell, which is to this day, is we didn't have any heat or air conditioning. Our lawyers would let us use their office for some like a quarterly operations meeting. And then they'd be about to leave the room and they'd point to the credenza and say, there are a bunch of supplies in there if you need them, pens and paper. And we would take them because we needed them and we didn't want to pay for them. And so to this day, we never have bought pens here at Harpoon, at Mass Bay Brewing Company. And every month, our CFO gives out what's called the Finance IPA Award, Increased Profits Award, to an employee who's come up with the best money-saving idea or sold the most, whatever it is. And we give away a pen from some It could be a Boston Globe pen or the Hilton Hotel or something. So, and I do that as just a way to kind of keep that story alive, if you will, that there was a time when we really didn't want to spend money on pens because it was that the business was in that tough shape. And we learned to be incredibly resilient during those days. And I think it's in our DNA, and it has stayed with us to this day, that, you know, we have a great business, but business is hard. And everybody, I think, who runs a company or is involved in a consumer product business knows you've got to continuously innovate, or consumers are going to go on to the next thing. And that has never been more true, really, than in the economy we have now.
You've also talked about how important it is for a brand to have authenticity, and that story you just told about the pens and sort of continuing the legend, if you will, of your story and your beginning and why you exist and what you fought for is an important part of that. And so when times do get hard, that you have this authentic brand to go back to. How else have you built this brand from the get-go?
It's a great question. And in a day when, you know, there are 8,500 craft breweries in the country, I think authenticity has never been more important, because consumers today care a great deal about the backstory. Now, that doesn't mean that there's still an awful lot of, you know, fluff or garbage out there, people, disinformation, if you will, fake news, whatever you want to call it, about brands and their heritage and history. But we've always felt like, as a very people-centric business where relationships still really do matter. I mean, at the end of the day, we're selling our beer to consumers, but we're selling to consumers via a store owner or a bar or restaurant owner. It's a one-on-one personal relationship. And so we base our authenticity on our people and who we are. And you know, it's all out there. You know, we have 400 pre-COVID, you know, we have 450,000 people a year that come visit one of our two breweries, either here in the Seaport or up in Vermont. And we've always encouraged that relationship with our consumers. We're not a kind of a marketing driven company. We certainly invest a lot in and pay a lot of attention to marketing, but we like to think of our brand reflects who we are as people first. And I know we're going to get into the employee ownership thing, but that's kind of all central to who we are and what our brands represent.
And well, you just highlighted it, and you know, we were talking beforehand about how innovative you are. And one of the things that you changed is that you decided that, you know, you had a number of investors that you were going to take on some debt to become an employee-owned company, to become an ESOP. Can you talk to us about what does that mean for your company, and why you did it, and what the results are? What could other companies learn about that?
You know, I'm a firm believer in the benefits of this great system that we have, right? To create wealth, creativity, et cetera. But I'm also a firm believer that, you know, we need to be inclusive in how we build our businesses, how we run our businesses. And I think ESOPs are one of these rare, like bipartisan, wonderful things that can not only work well for an individual business, but can be great for society. It's like, my partner wanted to sell the company. This is about 7 years ago. And he, you know, it's like, I want some kind of a transaction. And so I said, okay, well, I'll certainly be respectful of what you want to do, but let me look at alternatives to that. So he was going down the route of selling to a strategic buyer or to private equity. And I started to explore the employee ownership route. And I've never been motivated to simply grow this thing and then sell it off and get a check and be on my yacht someplace. That's not how I was raised. And so, and we've done this with an incredible group of employees here. So as I look more and more to the ESOP world, or the ESOP option, it appealed to me. But we were kind of at loggerheads. We each owned about 45% of the business. We had 6 other shareholders who had the remaining 11%. So what I suggested that we do is we treat those 6 like a jury. And I know this is not in any case study about the 90% owners of the company allowing the 11% owners of the company to decide the future, but each one of those shareholders stood to make some real money if we sold the business like my partner wanted to. So I wanted to give them the full opportunity. I didn't want to pursue the ESOP alone without their support. So we presented to that group, and the vote came back 6-0 to support going the employee ownership route. So people turned down a payday to kind of take a risk on sharing the fortunes of our business with our employees. So that was done in 2014, and we took on significant amount of debt to do that. We had to structure in a way because my partner wanted his money. That put us in a highly leveraged situation, which we've been dealing with ever since. So, but for culturally, we had a great culture before becoming employee owned, and it's really just deepened the culture here pretty dramatically. I think back to the days, earlier this year when COVID was hitting and everyone was like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? What is going to happen? And the fact that I came into this thing, with 175 fellow employee owners made it a heck of a lot easier. And I think that we're going to emerge from this year stronger than we went into it. And we took a hit. 35% of our revenue went away in March. So I'm not saying that we didn't take a real financial hit, but we've responded to it. And I think employee ownership explains a lot of the reason why that's the case.
It's really interesting. You wrote a really beautiful and unfortunately overly prescient letter in March to the community about how the shutdown was affecting your business. And you also noted what the impact was going to be on the broader community, the broader restaurant and bar community, which it's even worse than we imagined. And you've been an important voice in sort of leading and trying to figure out ways to help. What do you see as happening out there, and what can people do?
People can continue to do what a lot of folks have been doing, which is patronize. If it's curbside, outside, if you're comfortable going inside, this is brutal. And we're not talking about just the corner tavern. Legal Seafoods, Roger's been public about some of the challenges they face. This is not a small versus big, and if you're in the restaurant business or the travel business, this is destroying your business. And, having started a company 35 years ago, it becomes part of you, for better or for worse. And losing it has got to be brutal. And I know it from having lived in the business here. It's like a child. And my heart just breaks for some of these people that we know and have known for a very long time who did nothing wrong, who've gotten caught up in this pandemic. And so, yeah, we did the for the front line, we introduced a beer in the late spring, early summer, with all the proceeds going to support both here in Boston and up in Vermont, local organizations, part of which would support the hospitality industry. And we're talking about maybe doing, as long as we can stay open, maybe doing a buck a pint program to support the similar things here. And we've been trying to patronize as much as we possibly can. I think, and I hope the government, like the Cox in Washington, that really matters. Additional relief, the unemployment, it's all of that is really important. We certainly noticed it, how quickly in the second quarter, it went from this general sense of like, oh my God, and despair to settling down because of what the government did. They really took some good steps, and I hope that they do it again, because I think for the hospitality industry, people laid off again through no fault of their own, get the support they need to get through, the next several months, which we all know are going to be very, very difficult.
Mm. What you described, I think, really captures also a lot of the spirit of your company of responding to the moment. You were responding to the moment of crisis, and it's sort of, you have to have an innovative culture in order to do that. So you talked about how you setting up the ESOP, the Employee Stock Ownership Program, helped create this culture of ownership and responsibility, and thus innovation. I want to talk about some of the other ways that you've been innovative with the product, with what you do. I mean, if a person's not well versed in beer, you would be like, okay, well, there's a craft beer, but you've sort of taken that and stretched that in so many directions. Talk about your process and what you do.
Gosh, it's been so fun. And I do think back, Linda, to like 35 years ago, the first product we introduced was Harpoon Ale, which is the mild English ale. And at the time, I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? People were like, this is crazy. Now it would be so mainstream, not even be noticed, unfortunately. And then we introduced the first seasonal beer on the East Coast, Harpoon Winter Warmer, in 1988. And back then, what are you talking about? You're putting nutmeg and cinnamon. What is this in a beer? And then in 93, we introduced the first IPA on the East Coast, first craft IPA. And again, it was like, oh, these hops, what is it? And so it's just continued to expand. But today, when I have a stack of beer here where we have a golden milk with turmeric and other things. We're barrel aging. We're adding all kinds of spices and pushing the envelopes in so many different ways. We have the culture here. We have over in our employee lounge, we have 6 taps, and then we have 24 taps up in the beer hall. And we just encourage our brewers and others to kind of do test brews. And on the marketing side, we encourage.
I'm so sorry. I want to pause there. So I just want to be clear that you're, as part of their job is to drink beer.
Well, yes, I guess in some ways it is. Not drinking beer on the job. People can all have shift beers after they've finished working.
Which would make a lot of sense.
Which would make a lot of sense. And we have a vending machine here, 25 cents a beer, and that all goes to Harpoon Helps to Charity. But so we encourage people to come up with test brews and put them on tap in our employee lounge. And then we have a comment box for people. And so we're just generating ideas all the time on different beers that we want to make. And then if they do well, employees love them, maybe we'll put them on tap in the beer hall. We've also done, as I think you know, just a ton of really fun collaborations. We Dunkin' Donuts this fall. We did a jelly donut IPA. Now, if you told me 35 years ago that I'd be making a jelly donut IPA, I'd say, gosh, I hope not. But it's good, and it was a lot of fun working with our friends at Dunkin'. We've done the Mike's Pastry Cannoli Stout. We worked with Chris Wagner at the Bruins last year on Don't Poke the Bear. So we are very open and welcoming to ideas coming from all different sources. And we're in an industry where you can act on ideas pretty quickly. And we try to set it up structurally so that we can test those ideas and then bring them to market if it works.
You've also been branching even beyond beer with a collaboration with another local company, Polar, on the hard seltzer.
Yeah, this gets back to my Worcester roots, which I love. I've known the Crowley family forever. Our parents and grandparents knew each other, and my nephew just married a Crowley, and so we've now formalized the ties. So they are a great,
like a kingdom connection.
They are a great kind of New England institution, Polar, 5th generation family business. And so we started playing around with a beer collaboration in our UFO brand a few years ago. Then Ralph and I started talking about the hard seltzer market. And if anyone knows Ralph, he's a wonderful, wonderful man and a force of nature. And when he gives a go to something, it's a full on go. And so we jumped into the hard seltzer space, which, if any of you have been following it, is really the biggest story in beer since light beer in the 70s, and has achieved a 10% market share faster than light beer did. So it is a huge story. And we jumped into it about a year and a half ago with a brand called Arctic Chill. It was originally called Arctic Summer. We changed it to Arctic Chill with Polar, the second largest, seltzer company in the country, and certainly by far and away number one in New England and the Northeast. And we're having a lot of fun and having real success with it.
That's wonderful. It's just it's exciting to see that a 30-plus-year-old company is really putting such a value on innovation and changing and going into totally new fields.
And trying to do it, Linda, in ways, we're a New England company. Our roots are here. We are really proud to be a New England company, and partnering with people like Polar and Dunkin' and Mike's and the Chris Wagner, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We want to reflect the region. And so we innovate, but we remain focused on doing so in a way kind of consistent with our regional values, because we are a New England company and we have no plans to change.
I love that collaboration aspect as well. And, Massachusetts is known for a lot of different things, and our consumer tech, our consumer products is one that I don't think we're given enough credit for. But we do really have, and as you've mentioned, you've collaborated with a lot of them.
Yeah, and it's, we always say to people when we enter into a collaboration, which are largely done on handshakes, it's like the goal here is that we want to do this again next year, that we have a lot of fun, that we make a great product. In many cases, we support various charities, like the Mike's Cannoli. We've supported Christmas in the City, which is an amazing charity. The Chris Wagner Don't Poke the Bear, supporting the Corey Griffin Foundation. We're going to raise more and donate more money to charity in 2020 than we did last year.
Wow.
Which I'm particularly proud about. in the face of this pandemic. It's important to us. And working with great partners on it makes it even better.
There's a lot of social impact that your company focuses on, but while we're talking about Christmas and innovation, I think you have a great video to show us, right?
Yeah, it's so fun. Today is an official tree lighting ceremony in Boston, and there is an amazing backstory to why the province of Nova Scotia sends us a Christmas tree every year. And my associate, Charlie Story, who's another college classmate, who's a president here at Harpoon, he adopted or revised a very, very well-known poem to kind of tell the story. And so it's a feel-good story too, which we all need. So I think it'd be great if we could share it.
Please do.
Just before each Christmas, from Nova Scotia comes a tree, a wondrous symbol that inspires holiday glee, which sparked a conversation along the Atlantic coast between brewers who believed this was an occasion to toast. With a beer brewed in the spirit of caring, so Harpoon and Big Spruce Brewery got busy sharing. What about an Abbey Ale, brewed with spruce tips, of course, aged in Glen Breton barrels, a Canadian-American tour de force. Flavors complex and layered, with notes of dried fruit, they proclaim, the abundance of malts, so many we must call them by name. Now Bonlander, now Melanoidin, now Caramunic and Pale, on roasted barley, on wheat, oak and cherrywood smoked, what an ale. While nothing will erase the loss of that December, we raise a glass to the holidays and will always remember to give thanks to the friendship we're reminded of by the tree and the beer from Nova Scotia with love.
That was a beautiful poem.
And it goes on and on to tell the story of the explosion in Halifax Harbor, which was almost the power of an atomic bomb in 1917 that killed 2,000 or 3,000 people, and how Boston rushed aid to Halifax before the rest of Canada even did, because it was a blizzard. And since that time, they have given us a Christmas tree every year. It's a great story, and Charlie tells it in a beautiful way.
It is such a great story, and how great. So is this beer coming out only in the winter time? Is it
it's coming out like this week, and we did a special batch of it, and then it will probably be gone in about 2 or 3 weeks.
Wow. That is a beautiful story, and the perfect story for right now. I have so a number of people have I have a lot more questions, but listeners have been submitting questions. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go to some of those right now. So actually, one of them is about your community work. And one of the things that I was really impressed about reading was how you're working to diversify the industry. The brewing industry has been pale and male, as they would say.
And flannel, yes.
And pale male and flannel. But you've been really taking an active approach to trying to change that for even for new companies to bring more people into the fold. Can you talk to us about some of what you've been doing there?
Absolutely. And we started this a couple of years ago. We put something together called the Hop Forward Career Fair, because where it needs to come from is we need to reach out to communities who are underrepresented in the staff and at our breweries. You're absolutely right. If you go to a craft brewers convention, this is all pre-COVID, and if it's 11,000 people, it's 10,000 are white guys. It's just that's who the industry is. And this is something we are collectively talking about, but given our role here in Boston and in the industry in New England, we felt we should take a leadership role on it. So we hosted this Hop Forward Career Fair, reaching out to different organizations, particularly around Boston, try to say, we want to get different people interested in our industry. So now what we're doing to institutionalize that is working with the Mass Brewers Guild and we are going to create a resource basically for all breweries in the state to use to try to, how can we get more applicants? How can we get our job postings in front of communities of color, for example, who might not think of opportunities in craft beer in the past? So we know this is not a one and done. This is an ongoing commitment, that we've all made to say, like, we want to change as an industry. We want to evolve as a company. We have a very active, diversity, inclusion, and unity committee here at Harpoon. And so we're happy to take a leadership role in doing this because we think it's not only the right thing to do, but it's important for the success of our industry and the company in the future.
It's really great that as a company that's survived and has thrived for decades, that you're taking a leadership role here for the industry. You've also, in terms of bringing in different people, and you've had a special reach out to LGBTQ communities as well as to women and other communities. So thank you for your leadership there. Is there anything else what else can be done to help?
We're a business that we never felt that people should have to check their values at the door when they came to work. Again, it gets back to our employee-centric culture. People are at the center of everything we do, both employees and our consumers. And what we've done over the years in supporting the charities, whether it's the Angel Fund or Corey Griffin Foundation or Save the Harbor, Save the Bay, this all came from somebody here who cared about those particular issues. We had an original investor who died of ALS, and it got us involved with that. We've raised over $2 million. And it all comes from the values that our employees hold and the ties that they have to the community that now we have to that aspect of the community. And I think with one of the things that I'm so optimistic about the future is that our younger employees, again, they don't want there to be a disconnect between their values in their life and the values of where they work. And I think that we try to reflect that in a very positive way here at Harpoon.
Mm-hmm. I like this next question that came in, and it's appropriate after that really beautiful Nova Scotia story that you shared, where it said, I believe you were a history major at Harvard. Any recommendations for history books for our Christmas lists?
I'm reading, I'm working my way through, it's very good, but it's 1,000 pages by Robert Toombs, The English and Their History. And I was an English history minor and an American history major. I love history. Someone who knows me asked that question. So that is what I'm reading right now. And I'm also listening. I listen to books all the time. I'm re-listening to Trinity by Leon Uris, which I probably read originally, 40 something years ago, but that's another great one. I know it's a historical novel, a little easier slog than the English history one, but yes, I also view being in the beer business and not incompatible at all with being a history major, because the beer has been around for 5,000 years. So there's a ton of history in our industry.
Another book by a local author is Jill Lepore, We the People, which is another it's a thick book, and I've read parts. I keep sort of going back to it. It's just a really thoughtful and comprehensive.
I've heard about that. Good. I'll look for that.
This next question was clearly sent in by someone. It's a leading question by someone who clearly knows you. Dan, how did you enjoy your Germany trip a few years back, and did you like the people you traveled with?
Well, it's funny. I'm looking at this pen. I told the pen story earlier, and this pen is from the Hotel Pintor El Greco in Toledo, Spain, because we do an annual employee beer culture trip to Europe. So every year since 1999, we've taken employees when they hit their 5th anniversary of employment. Then every 3 or 4 years after that, they're eligible to go on a trip to Europe, where we go for a week to various places. And so this one was to Spain. We were supposed to go to Ireland this year until COVID hit, but we have a phenomenal time. I'll go with like 20 employees, and we'll visit breweries and historical sites, and we have a wonderful time. So the Germany trip, we've had several trips to Germany, as you might imagine. And I don't know which one in particular that person is asking about, but every single one of the trips has been terrific. And a way to deepen the culture here, I tell you, we could get rid of health insurance as a benefit before we got rid of those employee beer culture chips, because people absolutely love them. My wife keeps saying, like, how much longer can you keep doing these? Because, you know, they're fun. They're fun. That's all I'll say. What happens in Europe stays in Europe is what we say here at the brewery.
All right. This next question is actually it's an interesting question. I'm going to expand it slightly. With the legalization of the sale of marijuana in Massachusetts, there are a lot of infused drinks, CBD infused drinks that are in the market. Is this an area that you're considering?
We have had a couple of just very superficial conversations about it. It's not something that we are pursuing. I think if somebody can develop a beverage with a predictable level of THC, and, you know, I think it could be very interesting. People are working very, very hard on that right now. You can imagine if you could have achieved that, but I think it's proven to be a bit of a struggle. But I think, and Lindy, I'm sure you know this too from your business, that it's almost as important what you say no to as what you say yes to, because you're presented with a lot of ideas. But people come to me with a lot of different things. You guys should do this, you should do that. And it's like, yeah, maybe we can't do everything. So that's one. We went into the hard seltzer market instead of going into anything with marijuana, because it's in our wheelhouse in the relationship with Polar. But it would have been a distraction for us, we feel, to try to go down that avenue, because I think it's going to it's going to be challenging.
Do you see, so the actual question was, do you see potential for the taproom microbrewery industry to incorporate the legalization of marijuana into its operations? I think the question is, would you be selling at your taprooms?
Well, you know, the law here is really, it's pretty clear that you can't. They don't like cross-fertilization between alcohol and marijuana at this point. And the feds say one thing, states say another. At some point, do I think that could happen? Absolutely. But I just don't. I believe it's a ways away from the regulatory side. But again, we've come a long way in 10 years. So in another 10 years, absolutely could be a possibility.
So it's a possibility. And this next question is sort of a shift in topic. And I've actually heard you talk about this in terms of what's going on with big money buying up small breweries. And I would expand that to saying not just big money buying up small breweries, but big breweries getting into the micro beer. So if you could sort of zoom out on the industry for a minute.
Sure.
Happening.
Yeah, it kind of comes in waves. We went through a wave that ended maybe 2 years ago, where there's 5 years where a lot of brewers are being purchased. You know, you think of the craft brewery names that were bought by bigger breweries, whether it's Lagunitas, you know, Founders, Cisco, a lot more breweries are owned by bigger breweries than you think. Kona, you know, Red Hook owned by Budweiser. So it's been going on for quite a while. I'd say that as big a story in our industry in the last 10 years certainly has been the infusion of private equity money. Because one thing, you know, when private equity gets into a business, the clock starts ticking. So there's got to be a second transaction. There has to be a liquidity event where that company's going to sell to somebody else.
Yeah, the clock is ticking because it's not you are a long-term play. You are here for the long term.
That's right. We raised private money from individuals who were like very patient.
Yep.
And now we're an ESOP, and it's obvious. So we don't have a clock ticking like, gee, we've got to, unless, you know, I decide I want a clock to tick. But there's been a lot of sales in the industry, and what's confusing is people say, like, and we've had these battles within the industry. It's like, oh, okay, so now Cisco's owned effectively by Budweiser. So, but they're still craft brewer, and it's like, well, they're great people, love them. They got their money, good for them, I guess. But now they're part of the Budweiser network, for example, and they have Budweiser force going into chain stores, getting them shelf space. And so Now we're very different competitors than we were back when they were truly another craft brewery like us fighting for that space. So it's caused some friction at times in the industry. It's not a reflection on the quality of the beer. I've always just been a believer in being honest. It's tough to be happy with someone having it both ways, both having sold out and gotten the big check and then still portraying themselves as a little craft brewery. I think that's something that a lot of us in the industry, and I'm the founding president of the Massachusetts Brewers Guild, it's one of the reasons we wanted to start the guild is so that we could speak with the voice about who we are and who truly are the craft and the local suppliers, as opposed to sometimes people just portraying themselves that way.
And so this ties into what you were talking about before about the authenticity of a brand and the story. And, for you as a person who studied history to understand your company's history and be able to communicate that so that when I'm walking down, you call them warm shelf. When I'm walking down the warm shelf,
the dreaded warm shelf.
The extended warm shelf of all of these different, and this incredible variety that just couldn't even, I'm sure you never even dreamed of, that that you're picking a brand, which is more and more important to people whose values align with their own.
Well, Linda, it's a great topic because, if you talk about value investing, people talk about value investing. It's like, how about value consuming? It's kind of an interesting concept. Now, again, people going in to buy a six pack, they don't want to be making a value judgment each time they do that. I completely get that. But I know myself as a consumer, I really like to find something out about, those brands that I regularly purchase. Who owns them? Are they truly local? Is that money going back into the community, or is it going overseas or to a faraway state or whatever? Nothing necessarily wrong with that. But if I want my money to stay in the community, I make certain decisions. And I think I use the term the dreaded warm shelf because, we've been at this long enough to remember the previous boom bust cycles in the industry, and beer is a perishable product. And I think we call it the dreaded warm shelf because we'd much rather be in the cooler, because keeping beer cool keeps it fresher. Keeping beer cold keeps it fresher. So there's an amount of education that would benefit consumers to know too about not only the values of the brewery, where they are, who they are, et cetera, but also as far as the when the beer was made. That's really important, and how it's been handled.
And this is an area that you've been really advocating for, is that some standards of people putting the perishable date, that really emphasizing the reason why you want great local beer is because it has a shelf life and you can get great local beer that's fresh, but we all need to put, I'm not a brewer, but everybody else needs to put the date on it in a way that consumers can understand.
100%. I don't like to talk ill of any other brewery, but I'd say I would never buy a product without a code date on it. That's insulting to the consumer. Again, you can't buy milk without a code date on it. Now, milk goes bad, it can make you sick. Beer going bad will not make you sick. But even our IPA, it's 120-day shelf life on it. I'd rather it noticeably deteriorates over time. And any brewer would tell you that if you're making an all malt, dry hopped product, those hops break down. So I think it would be insulting to our consumers not to have a born on date so they can look at it and say, when was this brewed? Or when was this packaged, so that I can get a sense of how fresh this is. Because if one of the premises on which we based the business was local beer's fresh beer's better, well then, gosh, we better deliver on that with our consumers and respect them enough to have a code date on there.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's something that it's a voluntary thing. There's no requirement.
There's not. The Brewers Association, our national trade group, has come out pretty strongly, really encouraging breweries to do it. But there's certainly no government. There's no requirements that anyone do that. And sometimes people will do it. They'll put it in gibberish, so you have to get like a key to understand what these numbers mean on the package. It's like, no, just simply tell me when this beer was packaged. I'll make the decision myself.
And this is a question that I can't believe I didn't ask, is, so when you formed this in the 80s and you're 25 years old, why the name Harpoon?
Great question. I remember doing that research, going on to like the Mystic Seaport Museum. We wanted to locate in the city of Boston as close to the water as we could. So we wanted something nautically themed. That we kind of made that decision, like, okay, New England, the heritage, and 2 syllables, kind of, it's like that feels about right. And then something that could also be illustrated well for label purposes. And so I remember looking at like Great Atlantic. There was a ship named this or that, and but when we kind of came up with Harpoon, we kind of knew right away, yeah, that fits the bill. And again, back then we were a little bit nervous about the whaling thing, the negative connotations. Whaling was a bigger issue back then because fewer countries had outlawed it. And so that was one of the things we were nervous about. Like, is there going to be any blowback here that we're kind of pro whaling? And I said, well, we haven't done that in New England in about 180 years. I think we're probably okay.
It's a great story. It's a great origin in terms of why your thinking process, in terms of especially where you were, how when you started, you were really connecting to the location. You're really connecting to being in Boston and being on the Boston waterfront as part of the identity, and that's continued on.
Absolutely. Our space here, the only space that's been used for the same purposes for the full 35 years is our tour room. It was always because again, going back to those European trips, it was not just the beer, but the way you'd go into a town and a brewery would be in the center of town. It was part of the city, the town, whatever it is, like, oh, this is our brewery, and come and enjoy a beer here. And we always said, you know what, back when I would go on tours in the 80s for US breweries, it'd be at an industrial park out on the interstate someplace. Absolutely no heritage or sense of place or personality. So we were determined to present something different.
For someone, another person who knows you said, how has your friendship with Brian changed your life?
I'm gonna all for the better. We'll leave it at that. All for the better. I'm sorry that I have such rogue friends, Linda.
I appreciate it. What are the top 3 most pressing things city and state government can do to help the Boston hospitality industry as we turn the page? So you talked about, what we as consumers can do, and you talked about the relief that the federal government can do. And there's been a lot of movement locally with like, what's the plan and what are we doing? What if the governor were to call you tomorrow and say, Dan, what could I do? What advice would you give?
Well, I'll tell you, I think I start out by saying I've been largely impressed. The governor and the mayor have done it. I think this is new for everybody. I think got to cut people some slack. And the people that say they have the only people I know who are wrong are those that say they have all the answers. So I think they've really done a good job. I think we're dealing with things better now than we did in the spring. The way the governor's handling the shutdowns and the mayor is, they're trying to be as accommodating as they can. I think the more clarity people can give on what's potentially coming, the better. I just think that we're in the situation we're in. Individuals are going to make decisions based on these skyrocketing case rates, and they're not going to go to restaurants for a while. A few people will, but the numbers, they're all headed in the same direction. So getting that unemployment help to people is absolutely essential. I think and going to banks, we deal with our banks, and some of them have been terrific, but other ones haven't, and they use the regulator's telling us we can't do this. And it's like, well, wait a sec, the government is shoveling money out the door in one hand with PPP and other things, which are wonderful. And then you're telling me whoever this regulator is it the Fed is telling you got to be calling your loans and treating your clients poorly? So it's interesting. I think on the banking side, we've had tremendous cooperation from some of our banks. But getting the banking sector to kind of say, hey, guys, you know what? Our cost of capital has gone way down. Maybe we can just kind of stand down here for a while and work with our clients and get them through this. Maybe we'll make a little bit less money for a while. Everyone's got to share this pain. I remember being in conversations with them. We're like, no, we'll defer payments for 3 months. It's like, your cost of capital has gone to zero. Why don't you forgive them if you can? We're not, we lost those sales, and we're not deferring that revenue. We're not going to get it because of this pandemic. So I think encouraging banks to work with their clients and landlords to work with their tenants, which they're doing as much as possible, and government policies to allow them to do that, to encourage them to do that, whether it's from the regulatory side or the liquidity side, I think would be very, very helpful.
I've heard a lot about landlords, and I think the point that you're bringing up about banks is an interesting one as well. You have a beautiful background behind you. Is that Vermont?
No, and this could bring shudders of memories to people. This is here in Boston, and that is from the winter of 2015. That is the snow mountain.
I thought that was a real mountain.
No, that is the mountain that was down here that didn't melt until the first weekend of August. Next door here. And there are trucks that are like back and front loaders and things up on that, pushing snow up on it. So I'm sorry to scare people, but it is a picture of our brewery here in probably February of 2015.
Wow, and you have another tap room in Vermont.
We do, up in Windsor, Vermont. We purchased that 20 years ago. Yeah, and that is a prettier background, absolutely.
Wonderful. Those are the main questions that I got. There were a lot of questions, and it sort of shows what's on people's minds, and just in terms of COVID and the response. And I think I would sum up some of those questions to say, you said that the best time to start a business is actually when things are harder, because you get grittier and you get more adaptive, and you sort of develop these muscles of survival and innovation. Is now a good time to start?
Great time to start. I think it's a great time to start. I absolutely believe that. I know that's a little counterintuitive, but those lessons get in your DNA. And I just look at it in our industry and in the companies that kind of had adversity, like the fact that Sam Adams tried to drive us out of business the first 5 years we were in business was great for us in the long term. We hated it. It was really, really hard, but they made us, having a tough competitor like that and a tough time for the industry, we got through it, and it made us a better business. And I think the last thing you want is to ever get complacent running a business. And we've had stretches of those, or we've had some complacency set in, and it always comes back to bite you. And I think if you get into an industry and you have it easy, and quite a few craft brewers in the last pre-COVID, last several years, it's been a great time to start a brewery. And I think now everyone's kind of realizing, like, gee, this is kind of a tough business, and we have to be on our game every single day. And that you learn that in hard times. And so welcome them if you can, and understand that every challenge you surmount is going to make you a better business person. And so we've had everything thrown at us this year. And us as a business, when I tell people the leverage we came into the year with, and then we got hit with a 35% reduction of our revenue in the second quarter, our biggest quarter, and they're like, "Why are you still here?" I said, "Well, we're not only still here. We've had a good year. Revenues are down, profits are down, but the momentum behind our brands, our numbers in the last 3 months, we're going to refi the bank loan that we have. We're going to end the year significantly stronger than how we came into it." And that's because we leaned into it as engaged employee owners, kind of collectively said, "We're going to figure this out."
I love that spirit. I've actually heard, one of the best parts of my job is that I get to talk to great business leaders like you. And it's just been a beautiful learning experience. And this whole lunch series has been a lot of that, but it's that counterintuitively, this is actually a great time, that if you've been on the fence and you've had this idea of a business that you've been wanting to start, this is the time to do it. And so I hope that your inspiration and your story encourages others, and for people who are already at companies, to one, think about how they're helping, how they're part of their community. And I think that you, more than so many other companies, really exemplify that, of how you are not only, a phrase that we've used is that you're not only in Boston, you're of Boston, and you're building this ecosystem. And the way that you're supporting and working to really diversify the industry, to raise the standards of the industry and collaborate to just make great things is fantastic. So thank you so much for
you're kind to say all those things, Linda. Thank you. And what you're doing at the Globe, again, as a newspaper, what you're doing is incredibly important. Having a vibrant, strong local press, it scares me to think of what happens if that goes away. So keep up the great work that you and your husband and the team there are doing, because it's so, so important to all of us.
I'm grateful for you saying that. We all feel it's wonderful to work at a place that you really believe in, and we're doing really great work at the Globe, and I feel really proud to work there. And it's a tough time for every
Yeah.
company now, but we're adapting and we're innovating our way for the newspaper of tomorrow. So, and Jim, thank you for being part of this as well today. We had a really great conversation as you set us up for.
Thank
Wow,
you.
what a great discussion, and thank you, Linda and Dan, for bringing forth your own experience in real-time strategy. And UBS looks at next year. We call it the year of renewal, where we think we'll see a world that's steadily returning to normal. And despite all the continued uncertainty, we also see us kind of accelerating into a transformed future. And in a recent UBS client survey, 48% of our clients said that they were somewhat optimistic about the global economy over the next 12 months. And if you look out about 5 years, that number goes up to about 66%. So I think we're heading in the right direction. And our city has really been in the forefront of so many breakthroughs, not just in craft beers and Dan's story, but also, in biopharmaceutical and healthcare. And we have some exciting times with Moderna over the last couple of weeks in the press around the vaccine. And so with the innovation and resiliency of our city and the people, we believe the economies and the local entrepreneurs will not only rebound, but will actually rise to be stronger. And finally, I wanted to thank the Globe for this amazing experience and partnership with Greater New England and UBS. We've covered a lot of important topics that have been affecting us locally, and I hope that people will check out the previous segments when they have time. And the last thing, if you have questions about your personal wealth or your business or employee stock ownerships, most people don't realize that UBS controls about 60% of the market in the ESOP world. So we really do have an expertise there. And I'd encourage you to speak with your financial advisor if you have any questions or need information there. And lastly, on behalf of UBS, please be well, stay safe, and remain vigilant. And have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.